what do we even mean when we say reality is just an illusion? And how true is that statement actually? Most people are only spiritual when nothing is at stake, when they are not being morally challenged, when their comfort is not threatened, when they're sitting safely in the luxury of their homes. And that contradiction is the real question here, right? If we already know that everything is temporary, that reality is just an illusion, that nothing is personal, then why does the moment we suffer, our entire world shrinks into that one problem? Why does awareness suddenly just disappears the second after identity feels threatened? In those moments, everything becomes blurry. Logic clearly disappears. Our perspective collapses. And even though we've heard hundreds and thousands of times that this shall too pass, it genuinely feels like it is the end of the road. And this is not rare. This is not a rare experience because almost each one of us have gone through something like this at some point of our lives. And that alone tells us something very, very important, that knowing something is very different from seeing it clearly when it actually matters, when you are actually going through that experience itself. So before jumping to answers, it is worth slowing down and asking a deeper question, which is that what do we even mean when we say reality is just an illusion? And how true is that statement actually? Because clearly, pain feels real, fear feels real, loss feels real. If reality were simply fake or illusion, so to say, none of this would affect us as in the way that it does. And yet, across traditions, across religions, across philosophies, we keep hearing the same suggestions in different languages that what we experience as reality is not the whole picture. Now, to understand this, we need to separate two things that usually get mixed together. One is the world itself, which is the collective consciousness, and the other is how we experience the world, which is our universe, which is our reality on a individual scale. Now there are physical laws which are operating all the time, which is your classical physics, right? Cause and effect exists. Actions have consequences. This structure does not disappear just because someone calls reality an illusion. Fire will burn the same, gravity will still pull, life will still unfold in a certain order, but that is not where suffering lives. Suffering lives in the interpretation, in meaning, in the story the mind tells around what is happening. That's why you and I can go through the same situation and come out with completely different outcomes. So when I say if there are 10 people in a room, there are 10 different realities, I am not saying that because the room is different for each person, but because each mind is interpreting it differently. Everyone brings their own history, their fears, their beliefs, their expectations into the same moment that they are experiencing. What you notice, what you emphasize, what you resist, all of that shapes into what the moment becomes for you. You've probably heard people say that your reality is already a set in stone. And to a certain extent, that is not completely wrong. But what people miss out here is the nuance. There is a certain nuance to it. Destiny does not mean a single or fixed outcome waiting for you. It means that multiple realities already exist as possibilities, and your choice decides which one you step into. Let's take, for example, a career decision that you have to make. Now, you are stuck between giving an interview for a job that you don't want and taking the risk of starting your own business. Now, the moment this situation shows up, several paths already exist for you. You could go and give the interview, get the job, and then slowly feel trapped. You could avoid the interview altogether, rebel against it, and stay where you are and sink into frustration. Or you could go face the fear, reject the safe option, and build something of your own. Each choice leads to a completely different life, and all of those outcomes are possible from the same moment. So when people say, or whenever you've heard somebody say that everything is predestined, what they're really pointing to is that options already exist, but the direction is always yours. You always have the choice. What you experience as reality is often a delayed reflection of what you have already internalized. The way it is very, very important for you to understand that the way you interpret situations, the meaning you give them, and the decisions you repeatedly make will slowly turn into the life that you experience on a daily basis. Not because the universe is testing you or being cruel to you, but because perception shapes responses and responses shape outcome. In the end, it is always you versus you. You can either be your biggest support system, or you can become that one thing which is always standing in your way. Also, whenever you're going through something difficult, it always genuinely feels like, shit man, I am the only one always going through this. Why does it always happen with me? We always say this to ourselves, right? Because pain often narrows our perception, it isolates you from the inside. But the truth is, at that exact moment when you're going through something hellish, in that exact moment, countless others are also facing the similar challenges. The only difference is not the situation itself, but how each of you are relating to it internally. That inner relationship decides whether that experience breaks you, reshapes you, or passes through you with less damage. I have seen this clearly happen in my own life. There were situations that at one point felt completely unbearable. In those moments, I interpreted them as a proof that something was very, very wrong, that I am just never going to get out of the situations, and that I have reached a certain dead end. That interpretation made the suffering heavier than the situation itself. And over time, as I kind of tried to reshape my internal dialogue, as I changed my interpretation, not instantly but gradually, the same type of challenges stopped feeling like threats or life ending. And on the contrary, I started seeing them as signal that something of a bigger shift is going to happen. The external circumstances don't just magically disappear. What changes is the way that we see ourselves from the inside. This is where the idea of illusion becomes practical rather than it being philosophical. Reality is not unreal, but it is not fixed either. What feels solid and overwhelming is often a temporary mental construction, reinforced by our habits, our emotions. When suffering arises, it feels absolute because the mind is fully identified with it. And that's why in those moments we cannot see anything beyond it. Now, understanding this whole thing in theory, again, does not mean that your pain will magically disappear or it will not arrive again. It just simply means that over time, you will stop mistaking that temporary pain for the whole and entire truth. Then you can actually begin to experience a layered and a nuanced reality. One that feels like what feels permanent in the given moment is actually moving. And that our role is not to escape reality or to jump somewhere, but to see more clearly through it. Not as something happening to us, but as something that we are constantly interpreting, something that is arising from us. And that is the real shift. Not asking how to escape illusion, but learning how to live without being completely trapped inside it. And with that, I will see you in the next video.